Welcome to the Everything Saxophone Podcast, Lauren. It's so great to meet you.
It's so nice to meet you too. Thank you so much for having me.
I was just recently listening to the Dizzy's Rewind show that they just put up on YouTube a few days ago with you and with Lioness, the collective, and it blew me away. It was so good. I just wanted to let you know, and I'm just putting that out there because I'm going to let the audience know too. I'll put a link in the show notes. You all have to check out that set from almost a year ago in December of last year. So good. And I just want to say, man, you're such an amazing player, and I'm just really happy to have you on here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Now, we were talking a little bit before, and I didn't realize this, but we both came from around the same place. So we're
Yes.
both Long Island, one word, Long
Yeah.
Island.
Strong Island
That's right. That's right.
represents.
Absolutely. And you know the funny thing? You don't have the accent like I do. I'm thinking, New York.
It comes out. I feel like it comes out certain words, maybe I feel like sometimes it's because I've lived in New York City since 1997, and I've just picked up so many different accents from people like for since then. And even when I would come home from school, and my parents would notice, you sound different, like what's going on? And I said, I don't know. I'm just, hey, we're musicians, and language, the music is a language. So I think that our ears are just open to, picking up other types of expression, and expression, language is expression, right? Accents are expression. So I think, just maybe my accent started to become a little bit more New York City,
As opposed to Long Island.
international, Long Island. Yeah, it comes out though here and there.
You know, the funny thing, this reminds me of a story. I had gone to the New York State Summer School for the Arts. We just called it Saratoga. And
Hmm.
everybody would make fun of how I talked. They would say, Donna, say water. I'd be like, water.
Right, right. It's just getting you to say certain words and
Oh man, it was, say orange. Orange.
right, right.
It's
Orange,
orange. What's wrong with you? Or orange.
coffee, coffee.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
coffee. Give me some coffee.
yeah.
Too funny. Well, actually, getting into the Long Island thing, I know I had a really good upbringing in the schools, in the public schools, because Long Island, very good for jazz, absolutely in the schools,
Amazing. Yep.
right? And with music, can you talk a little bit about, I want to dive into your background when you started playing, when you started in music, because maybe it wasn't on the saxophone, it could have been on piano, when you started playing Bari, all those types of things.
Sure. So, I started getting into music. I was pretty young. I was about 5, and my mother is a great classical piano player. I mean, she plays for fun, but when you hear you're like, wow, okay, yeah, it's more than fun. But she started teaching me, and my older brother plays saxophone. So when I was around 8 years old, I was so fascinated and interested in the saxophone, and so my parents were like, well, I guess I guess we got to get you a saxophone. And then I started playing in school, and I guess it was around like 6th or 7th grade I started to get really interested in learning how to play jazz. And my teacher at the time, Jeff Lang, he started making. Oh, you know Jeff?
Jeff Lang is amazing. I took some lessons
Yeah.
with him. He actually, oh my gosh, this is great. Yeah, Jeff
See,
actually
we're gonna
totally,
find out we know a lot of the same people, probably, right?
oh my God, yeah, yeah. Jeff totally changed the way I thought about playing and embouchure and all that kind of thing. Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, he was the guy, like there were a lot of great saxophone teachers in Long Island. I mean, as you know, and Jeff, he's the real deal, and he made all of these tapes for me. So he would have like a cassette tape with Charlie Parker and Hank Mobley and Coltrane and Miles, and just this amazing like cross section of stuff to listen to. And then on top of that, my father was a really really avid jazz fan. He had tons of recordings. So I remember he gave me Miles Davis kind of blue, and and I was fixated on playing jazz, even though I was still playing piano. And with piano, I was really mainly focusing on classical music. And I got to a certain point in high school where I really, I started deciding that saxophone was going to be the way I was going to go. And then I started to get to the point where I felt like alto was maybe not the right fit for me. But I didn't really want to play tenor. I love tenor. Like, I mean, most of what I listened to was tenor players, but I just didn't want to play it. I don't know if that makes any sense. But it was Jeff who suggested I try the baritone. And he really, like, he played all the saxophones, but baritone was really kind of his main one. And he said, I think you're really going to just fall in love with the baritone. And he knew it, within a few notes. I was like, this is it for me, and I was probably 16 the first time I tried the baritone. And then I didn't even really want to play the alto. I mean, I had to in school in certain situations, but I was playing Bari. There was a program in East Meadow called Nassau Suffolk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Bill Katz was directing I did the concert band with Joel Levy one year,
Oh
and
yeah.
then I did the jazz ensemble my senior year with Bill Katz, and I was playing Bari. So I was really starting to do a lot of stuff outside of school on Bari, like all state jazz on Bari. I did one of the Grammy bands on Bari, and then when the time came, I initially actually was supposed to go to Hofstra University, and then I wound up like kind of last minute auditioning for Manhattan School of Music, and I got accepted. So I had changed my whole trajectory. I was going to go to Hofstra and major in music education, and
Wow.
then I decided, like, my family was ultra supportive of me, and they said, if you get into MSM, we'll figure out a way for you to go there. And I wound up getting accepted, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna, be a professional. It's funny because I guess in some ways at that age I was more of a planner, you know, and I very, very infrequently would deviate from any kind of plan that I made for myself, because I just, I don't know if I liked the uncertainty of it. And then suddenly I was going to do something that I didn't think I was, that I hadn't even thought of, It was like, oh, I didn't realize I could just move to New York City and become a professional jazz musician. Like, okay, why not? You got to try it. Um,
And it's a
and
great school. Manhattan School of Music is a fantastic school.
Yeah, I mean, I was surrounded by people who were like, and even, just at my age, like I really, it was the perfect environment for me because I really just got my butt kicked. Everyone was at such a high level. And I think sometimes, or at least for me, you can get comfortable in being like a big fish in a smaller pond, and then suddenly you're like, everything is flipped. And so you have to look at everything with a different perspective. So having the opportunity to go to New York City, I mean, that in and of itself, and to attend Manhattan School of Music was like, wow. So that was basically my early, journey to New York City, you know.
Let
And
me
then
ask
when
you,
I Yeah,
let me interrupt for one second. Let me ask
sure.
you something. So I know the quality of like the East Meadow, the Nassau Suffolk
Mm,
Jazz. I mean, it's really it's all state level. I know that.
yep.
And New York
Yep.
All State Jazz Band is just ridiculously good. So I know that.
Yep.
I also know Miller Place also you had good stuff there. Jeff Lang is an amazing
Ah,
teacher.
yeah.
And when you say that you felt like, obviously on Long Island, in your school, you're going to be a big fish in a little pond. And when you go to Manhattan School of Music, it is going to flip to a certain degree, but you had incredible training. So how did you, mindset wise, how did you deal with that flip? How did you deal with that?
Um, I really had to just be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's a good lesson just in life and in music in general, because it's not like, I mean, even when you reach a certain level, or you think you've attained a certain amount of success, being a professional musician, there's always going to be this level of uncertainty. So you have to be able to deal with that in a certain way. And the thing about music conservatory, and I saw this, I mean, a lot of people don't survive it. A lot of people wind up dropping out or leaving, or it just becomes too difficult for them because it's an intense environment, you know? And I had to really just tell myself to persevere, you know, because there were definitely moments where, you know, you want to give up, or you feel like you're not good enough, or, you know, you shouldn't be in certain situations or whatever. But I just say you need to, you have to be strong. I mean, there's really no choice, you know, and it's okay to be strong and still feel like, you know, you're weak. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think sometimes we feel, and especially as women, like we feel like shame in feeling weak, but in this odd, strange way, when you have this weakness, it's just you have to use it as an opportunity to grow. And then you just reach certain markers in your life where you feel, I feel weak on this, or I feel weak about that, and you have to look at it through a lens of compassion instead of judgment, you know. So I think that's like a really important thing to bear in mind when you're trying to get through something like where your ego is getting really bruised all the time, you
Yeah,
know.
definitely. And you know what's interesting too? I had interviewed Camille Thurman, who she's so
I
wonderful.
love her.
Oh,
Oh,
she's so great.
I love
And
her.
and she shared just a story of like horrific, you know, bullying and all that kind of stuff that went on in her high school, the New York
Yeah,
High School for the Performing Arts. As a woman, as a Bari player, especially because there's not that many Bari players compared to alto players and whatnot in school, but um, I know you had the support at home from your parents and also from Jeff as well. But
yeah.
in school, like, how did that, you know, how did that work out for you as a woman? Did you feel any difference there, or was it, you know, just one of the guys type of thing?
Well, I guess like in certain moments in earlier, I felt like earlier on in high school, I felt like I did need to prove myself to a certain extent, you know, and whether or not that was because I was a girl, or because I was also like I had mentioned earlier, that my older brother is the saxophone player, and he, you know, very super unbelievably talented. And I think sometimes maybe some of the instructors thought that, oh, like just because you're Greg's little sister doesn't mean you get special treatment, kind of a thing, you know? So, and some, but it also made me want to just say, like, hey, I am my own person. It doesn't matter like who, you know, this is what I talk about, coming from a really small pond. And Miller Place is a really small school, you know, but again, it just is this, you know, it's just a reminder that, you know, having to prove yourself isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it just forces you to work on yourself and to work really hard, you know. So um even though sometimes I would feel a little bit out of place, there are also I did have the experience of having a couple of good friends of mine that were in the jazz ensemble as well, who are also women. So that was
That's good.
also fun for me to have that, and not to feel totally, you know, like I not isolated, but um it's nice to have the presence of your friends there too, for really just for fun, you know.
Absolutely, acceptance and all that type of thing. It just it makes you more comfortable. And when you're more comfortable, number one, you could learn better. You could
Yeah.
certainly, you know, absolutely learn better. And yeah, it just makes it a lot easier to deal with. Now, before we actually even get to college, let me ask this question now. So Jeff was your teacher in middle school.
So when
And
he was my private instructor, from sixth grade all through high school. So for 6 years, he was
that's awesome.
my private instructor, and I had a amazing, all my teachers coming up through all the schools. I had a fantastic young female band instructor when I was from fourth to sixth grade, Mrs. Harger, and she played every instrument, and I just thought it was like, it didn't even occur to me at the time, because you're a kid and you're like, oh, this is my teacher, she's awesome, she plays everything, she
Yeah.
plays flute, she plays trumpet, she does all this stuff, you know but as a kid, it didn't occur to me that it was a rarity to see a woman in that sort of role, you know and then in junior high school, I had a really fun concert band and jazz ensemble instructor, Mr. Rakowski. He was just super cool. Like, he had this look that he was really just had a great vibe, and he would always dance in front of the band, and just just a really cool guy. And then in high school, I had Craig Van Bargen, and really he's like a huge reason why I wound up going pro, because if there were any opportunities outside of school, he made sure that I knew about them, whether it was going to audition for, I think he was the one that told me about Nassau Suffolk, actually, and auditioning for the Grammy bands, and doing, all state, and all those things, and he really went above and beyond for all of his students. And he's really the reason why Miller Place had such a strong program. Our high school was one of the finalists in the very first, essentially, Ellington competition in 1996. And for such a small school, that was a really, really big deal.
Yeah.
And so he really did so much. So again, like, I just feel like I was really lucky in that I was in a lot of nurturing situations. And that's not to say that, yeah, I did have sometimes, like, certain competitive, like, issues with some of the boys. And I don't know if it's my personality or whatever, but for me, it was just fun to, like, try to be better than they were.
Good for
I
you.
don't know. But a lot of it was, you know, and then sometimes when you do have that attitude, you get, like, you get a reputation like, oh, she has an attitude or whatever. And I'm just kind of like, okay, well, if that's how you want to see it, that's fine.
Good for you.
I like, it is what it is.
Definitely. Now let me ask you, amongst those teachers, and maybe this will apply more to Jeff, I'm thinking, but what was one, what was one, no, who was your most influential teacher in terms of, whether it's tone, whether it's improvisation or technique? Which would you say was the most influential for you?
Are we speaking in terms of, like, high school, or this? Are we including college years as well, or?
Let's say high school, up to high school,
Okay.
because I'll ask the
I
same
would
thing for
say that
college.
was, yeah, I would say for sure Jeff, and especially having studied with him privately for 6 years, and also, like, it was pretty much weekly. There were a few times I would miss because of whatever, but in general, and we used to just spend so much time just talking about music. Sometimes we just spend a whole lesson talking about Steely Dan, you know.
Wow.
But he really taught me really how to play the saxophone properly. We did spend a lot of time, like, he introduced me to a lot of books, like stuff like Oliver Nelson's Patterns for Improvisation, these Lenny Niehaus series. He really introduced me to all of these books, and he would show me the theoretical, even though my theory was not that strong then. He would show me all the theoretical stuff behind it, and why it's important to practice these exercises. And you know and he was a person who introduced me to Pepper Adams, when I wanted to play the baritone. And then as soon as I heard Pepper Adams sound, I was like, yep, that's the kind of sound I really want to go for. you know just felt like very, very connected to that. So I would say that he definitely has had the most influence on me in terms of, sound and improvisation.
What was one, if you can share, like what was one exercise, aside from maybe the Oliver Nelson stuff, one exercise that, really influenced you that actually, when you teach, you use with your students, or you just use in general, you still like play today?
Well, from Jeff, he showed me this exercise. It's called the 2-octave scale pattern. So, for example, when you start, you'll like, let's just take the C major scale, for example, and then as you're playing the ascending, so you're playing C major ascending, and then descending, you're playing D Dorian, and then ascending, you're playing E Phrygian. Technically, it's right. It's all in the key of C, but the way that the pattern plays itself out, it's like I can't sing that high, but you get the point.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I still, to this day use that exercise because it teaches you fluidity. It gives you, instead of just playing your scales in this kind of arbitrary way, like just ascending and descending 2 octaves, it really forces you to play that scale and throughout the entire range of your instrument, because if you think about it as you're improvising, you're not just going to be playing this scale in one direction or the other, right? You're going to be playing it from different points. So to me, it's a very useful exercise technique wise, and it's going to benefit your harmony as well.
And also, yeah, theory too, because I call that like the modal scale exercise. And
Yeah.
I remember this from the Arb. I play trumpet too, so from the Arbin book,
Okay.
you'd see that, or the Rubank books. Have you
Yeah.
gone to? Yeah, so in the Rubank books, you may see something like that. And what's great is you're playing through all the modes in
Yep.
major in
Yep.
one exercise.
Exactly. And then you can apply that same exercise to all of your minor scales, and then you're going through all, say, your melodic minor modes, and then all of your harmonic minor modes, and then you have to think of it. I always suggest to think, as you're playing, to because it's easy to sometimes go muscle memory and not really think of each individual scale, but to try to think of it not just in the key that you're in, but to think about each individual scale as you're, or each, not scale, but mode, each individual mode as you're playing it.
Definitely. Yeah, and actually that's great advice because it's very easy to get into a routine of just doing like your major scales, but
Yeah.
that's not as easy when you're dealing with melodic and harmonic minor.
It's actually a really great way to teach yourself about, if you don't know that much about the modes of melodic and harmonic minor, it's a great way to teach yourself those modes as well, and to figure them out on your own versus like being told what they are, because then you're more likely to actually remember them.
Right? That's true. That's very true. Absolutely. Because again, doing it,
Yeah.
right? It's the doing it that that just makes it internalized and stuff. All right, so
Yeah.
now we're going to go into college. And who were your most influential teachers there?
I would definitely say Mark Turner and Micah Benny. Um, just Mark, he has so much knowledge of the saxophone, and yeah, like he did give me a lot of cool stuff to practice, a lot of pentatonic stuff, combinations of how to work different pentatonic scales and different. I don't know. I got into this whole tone scale obsession, and he was giving me all these patterns to practice over sharp five chords and whole tone, and I was, some of them I still just have emblazoned under my fingers because I spent a lot of time with them. But he also really forced me to transcribe and really get into the solos that I was transcribing, and I really did feel like that, by focusing on the transcription aspect, all of that language became assimilated into my concept, so there are a few solos that I transcribed while I was studying with Mark that had such a huge influence on me and still do, you
Which
know.
ones? You know what
Oh,
I have.
well, sure. Well, we're talking about it. um, Satellite, John Coltrane's Satellite. Um, Dexter Gordon's Cheesecake is another one. Pepper Adams, Serenity, that was another one. And I made it through the first three choruses of Joe Henderson's An Urge. And that was it. But it's funny, those first few choruses, I mean, I know that all those players have, I feel like when I started, those solos, just to me in particular, they really stick out as far as being influential, you know. And Mark is, he would encourage me to record myself at whenever possible. He said, you're going to be able to discover so much more about your playing when you record and listen back, because you do think, like, you might think you sound a certain way, and then you listen back and you realize, that's different than what I want, or, oh, I like this but I don't like that, and you really can change and grow by going through that process, and it's a painstaking process, but those are the things for me that stick out to me with studying with Mark. And also his personality was so cool. He would assign me stuff and he would say, well, you can choose to do it or you can choose not to. He was so he was so laid back about it, but it's just, there was something about it when he would say it. It made you like, oh, I have to do this, because the way that he asked me was just so, he's not gonna like yell at you to do something, really, because it wasn't, at least for me at that point when I was in school, I needed somebody like that to sort of treat me that way, and it was really respectful. So that had a huge effect on me, because you can be respectful when you're instructing somebody. You don't really need to be callous. I don't really see the point in that, and not everybody has that same philosophy, and that's fine. But I just, I learned from him just as an instructor, like what's effective and what isn't.
That's huge. That's so huge because, oh my gosh, yeah, that brought back a lot of memories for me too, in college with certain instructors, you knew that if they asked you to do something, definitely do it,
Yeah.
and I'm also thinking in terms of not even just private teachers, but also the teachers in school as well. I mean, we knew of the teachers that were definitely callous and, felt that, oh, we have to train these students to, be prepared for this. So let's act callous to them now. But that, to me, that's not the right way to do it, you know?
Yeah, I just don't see, personally, I just don't see any point in it, especially when you're at a certain level, like, especially when you're at a university level. I mean, listen, it's one thing if you have, a student that is, disagreeable and that won't do anything. Then I think, yeah, you can throw the book at them. But if you have someone that's really trying and obviously has the drive and is really searching, then I don't see any particular reason that you need to, be nasty. Like, I just don't really
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah, I
But
know. And I mean, yeah, there are, it's not like everybody is a saint, in the professional world, in the industry, but I have to say, every single person that I've interviewed for this podcast, just amazing, amazing players, but also amazing people. Amazing people. I mean, we were, I'll just share it with everybody. We were talking for probably like 15, 20 minutes before we started
yeah,
doing the podcast. And it was like, I feel like I know you, and it is that Long Island connection, but
it sure is. Yeah.
it sure is. And the thing is that the best players to me that I know of are the nicest people, and
Well, I think the community aspect of this music is something we have to keep emphasis on, especially now during this pandemic, because we don't have the luxury of having all of these gigs and these travel experiences that we're used to. So it's more important than ever to be kind to each other and to share each other's stories so we can, keep moving in the right direction when things, do go back to normal. And they will. It will take a lot of time. And, you know, certain things I think will be different just because based on the way that we're living now and, your whole thought process changes about certain things. But I just, the thing that always comes back to me, and this is everybody that, like that has traveled all over the world and like the one and whose like careers and people I really respect, and they all come back to the same thing, is that music is a love thing, music is a community thing. And that's not to say that you won't encounter people that are great players, but as people, yeah, it's tough to be around them, and will they necessarily have the longevity? I mean, maybe, but I don't, again, like for personally, I just don't see the point in, being a jerk. I don't know. It's not my personality, I don't think. Unless you're a jerk to me, then I'll be a jerk back. I have no problem with that.
That's the New Yorker. That's the Long Islander part.
Yeah, it sure is.
We don't take crap.
Exactly. We don't. We'll stand up for ourselves, and we'll stand up for what's right. So I think that there's a line between that. So like sometimes the bullying thing, like people become the bully because maybe they were bullied or they were hurt or they, the whole thing hurt people. And that, I think sometimes with certain folks that, maybe their personality comes across a certain way is because they've had a life experience that was different than yours and mine, and not to say that that's an excuse. It's just, it's just what it is. And
let me I'm going to digress for a little bit, because and I'll try to remember to get back to other influential teachers at Manhattan School of Music. But in terms of this bullying thing, and even as women, you're younger than me, you're the generation younger than me, but even talking to Camille, just the stuff that she went through, I couldn't believe it, when she was telling me all these stories. And it really depends, I think, on what school you're going to, the generation, even what's going on in society. Even watching TV reruns of like favorite shows, like I'll just say this, I like NCIS, right? So, from what it is now to when it first started is like night and day compared to, like the way women are treated and stuff. So let me ask you this question in terms of being a woman in jazz. Did you, are you still experienced or have you experienced any kind of like negativity, or I don't want to say maybe it's bullying, and I'm not sure, but have you experienced any kind of negativity?
oh yeah, I mean, most definitely.
It's so sad. It really is so sad.
Yeah, I mean, it like negativity, um sometimes the bullying thing, maybe not outright bullying, more of a subtle kind of competitive bullying, that I've experienced. And for me, it's like, I don't know. And again, this is maybe my personality, but I can be very competitive, I don't need to be, but for me, it's kind of like, okay, if somebody steps to me in that way, I will step right back, you know, and I guess, if you speak to my mom about it, she would say, yep, that's Lauren's always been this way. Like, it's not, she's been this way since she was 3. So, um, yeah. So, sorry, just to get back to what we were talking about before my light went out on us. Um, I, yeah, I have experienced it. I feel like, and I've definitely had moments where I'm, you do feel like, oh, I just don't even want to deal with this anymore, or just like garbage, or I feel bad, but you take the time to wallow in that awful feeling or those awful feelings, and I just, I would just try to spin it around into something that's positive, and like, okay, so how am I going to make this work for me? How am I going to use this experience to move forward, to make, or to make myself stronger and to inspire other people, because I feel like, no matter who you talk to, they've gone, everybody has a story, Everyone has an experience that has made them into the person that they are. And then some people do experience it on a greater level than others. You know, um, to me, a lot of it I think does stem from insecurity, and competitiveness when people are trying to attack you overtly like that. And I don't experience. I feel like I don't experience it as much as I used to, and this is probably due to the fact that I'm older and I've just sort of been around a little longer, you know. But earlier on in general is when most people experience it, and it can be very, you know, it really can be debilitating. It can really cause you to start thinking about yourself in that way. You have to fight it. You have to.
And you know what's interesting too? So glad you're sharing this because what a lot of people may not realize is that you could have all the technique in the world. You could be a great improviser or a great reader, a great classical player, but if you don't have the mindset where you're not strong enough, um, you won't sound like you have a lot of great technique. You won't sound like you have a great tone. It totally affects your confidence. And when the biggest thing that people always say is, I'm not confident on stage. And the
Mm,
thing is that a lot of it is up here. It's your mindset.
yeah. A lot of it is, and I think in terms of being on stage or being in front of an audience, the more you do it, the more it just becomes natural, and you have to look at it in the way that the audience is there for you. They're here because they want to be there for the usually, maybe they're there having dinner or whatever. Even so, that to me that's almost better, you know, because then you can really like you may give them something that they didn't expect to get, and music is, in my opinion, the greatest gift. I mean, I've had a lot of people before come up to me and, say like, "Oh, I never knew what a baritone sax was, but oh God, it's so cool." To me, that's like the greatest thing because you introduce them to something that was completely outside of their world that they didn't even know about. And again, it's like these connections, these experiences, these things. That's what music really is about. And we're getting back to this community, community aspect. But as far as being in front of the audience and the fear that can instill in you, it's, a lot of people are very affected by it, and it's almost this thing like you have to fake it until you make it, to not, and to know that most people feel the same way that you do, and not feeling so alone in it. Like, oh, am I the only person that feels this way? Like, no, everybody, everybody has gone through this in one way or the other, you know. And
Yeah.
I know my mom, like, 'cause my mom always talks about how she used to like playing the organ in church because she didn't want to be in front of the audience. She had extreme stage fright, and she would say she would say and still says, like, I don't know how you get on the stage in front of all those people. You know, it's really a mindset. You have to just, again, like, you tell yourself that, this, they came here to see you and to hear you, and you want to, part of what will influence you on the bandstand is the energy that you get from the audience, and hopefully it's a good energy. Sometimes it's not a great energy, and sometimes it can be disrespectful, but you have to be able to work with that as well, you know and it's not always going to be one way or the other. So for me, it's like, I enjoy, like, kind of course it's great to play for people that are super into it and just cheering, and that's the obvious ideal, but is that going to be the norm all the time? No. So you have to be able to adapt and still, in a way, like, do your job, because it's those situations too that will teach you about how to be a better musician.
Yeah. Wow. Oh gosh, there's so many great points here. And with that too, many of the situations, like you said, a lot of times we're playing where people are having dinner, or
Yeah.
maybe doing something else. And like, I always try to think to myself, okay, I'm in this situation. Is there someone in that audience that is having a horrible day?
Yeah.
Is there a way, what can I do to flip their mood?
Yeah.
Even in a situation where yeah, the room is kind of dead, it's like people aren't quite into it, or they're just like, oh, okay, it's music. Instead of like, XM radio on, it's like people playing,
Right.
that kind of thing. So it's that kind of situation. But what's interesting too that you said as well, and this reminds me of when I worked in music education. I was in Syosset for actually over 14 years teaching
Oh,
there,
wow. Okay.
elementary band, and I had my jazz band too, and it was really cool. But we were always encouraged by the district director, Mike Salzman. He would always say, play, get the kids playing, get them playing all the time, get them playing at NISMA, get them,
Yeah. Nisma.
yeah, bringing back memories here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Level 6. And, you
Yeah.
know, it's funny when people hear you talk about like, oh, NISMA level 6, and they're for from out of state. They're like, what is this level 6? Like, what is that?
It's called professional level solos. That's what it's
Yeah.
called.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Uh,
But it's you alluded to it, you actually kind of said it. The more that you just do it, and the more that you play in public, especially in front of people that may not be as into it, that actually will tell you a lot more. And that may help you to put or get you to another level in order to get those people's attention so that they do pay attention. And then, you change somebody's mood, you change somebody's aspect, just like that person
yeah.
helped you.
Yeah, I mean, and that can be a very powerful thing, and it's a learning experience. And you're and sometimes you're not going to change somebody's mind. Somebody's just going to be like, I don't like this. I hate it. And that's like, okay. I mean, that's the world.
Yep.
That's life. It's okay. It's okay if you're not going to, but the majority of people, like, you'll have a positive effect on it. It's like, you know, and just to bring that up, it's very easy to just focus on like the one negative thing that somebody says versus all the positive things that people say, you know. So that's another important thing to really check yourself on, because I would get very discouraged if I would see like one negative comment and you see like, the rest are positive, but I would focus on the one, negative thing, and that's a big mistake. It's a big mistake to focus on that one negative thing, because in a way, like, if something is so negative that it's offensive, it's like, okay, that person, that they have something going on that's that you're not going to fix, and sometimes you got to move on from that.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's awesome advice. Well, I'm going to backtrack now because we talked about Mark Turner. Was there
Yeah.
anybody, and actually with Mark Turner too, he had you transcribing.
Yeah.
Did you transcribe in high school or before then, or was college your
I mean,
first
a
time?
little bit, but not to the extent and to the depth that I was doing it in college. You know, like maybe parts of bird solos, but never like a full solo, really. You
Got it.
know, yeah,
Okay. I was curious about that. So
yeah. I don't know why, but I just hadn't really.
I'm wondering, hmm, I know, well, you were playing alto in high school, but you also, you moved to the Bari as well. Do you feel that, um, I don't know if this is a silly question or not, but I would tend to think maybe that alto and tenor players may try to transcribe more than Bari players because of a role that they may be playing in an ensemble. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're in a big band, yeah, sure, everybody can solo, but usually the alto and the tenor tends to solo more. Do
Yeah.
you find that maybe Bari players don't transcribe as much, or am I just like in left field or something?
Um. I mean, maybe at a certain point, earlier on, they're not transcribing as much. Um, and then again, for me, like, I probably wasn't playing Barry more full time until I hit college, and then and maybe that's why I wasn't really like transcribing so much, because I was still playing some alto. I don't know. Um, but a lot of the Barry players that I know transcribe a lot, you know. So I I don't know. I'm not really sure.
I'm probably in left field, but that's cool. That's good. It's all
No, but
good.
that's a good question. That's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, actually, you know, sometimes like, and I haven't encountered this as much, but there was a certain point where, you know, people wouldn't expect that you could solo as a Bari player. So maybe that's something you're getting at, because there were certain baritone players that didn't solo whatsoever. They just played parts, they played in the section, and they did an incredible job doing that, but they just didn't really solo so much, you know? So that's something to consider,
Yeah,
you know?
definitely. I think that's kind of what I'm tapping into. But
Yeah.
so getting back to Manhattan School of Music, Mark Turner, anybody else that influenced you?
Well, I had a great experience studying with Micah Benny.
Right.
I took composition and arranging from him, and I was also in his ensembles, and did some private study with him, and just such a great, you know, great spirit. And I learned so much from him, just about like really how to have fun in music, and you know, like in terms of like registers, like where the baritone sits, like where to write really well so the baritone could, you know, cut through to a certain level, and the, you know, what registers worked well for certain instruments, you know, instrument combinations, things like that. And I lent them out to a friend of mine, but he had given me a bunch of his scores that he had done for, you know, different big bands and stuff. So it was really just, you know, just for an instructor to do that, like come in with a stack of scores, like, oh, here you go, you can study these. I mean, I was like, whoa, wow, that's amazing. Like, this is all this work, and you're just letting me have it. Okay, that's cool. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, definitely. And you just actually answered the question I was going to ask you, which is what was the biggest or most influential thing that he actually did, that stuck with you. So it was really in this area. And in terms of, what he taught you, that still has, that still applies today, right? In terms of how you're writing and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I feel like you know, in a way, it influenced in terms of how I was composing melodies, you know, in terms of like what sits well on the baritone, and really knowing your instrument, because sometimes you would sit at the piano and play something and didn't try really translate right to the instrument. And I don't know if it was just a baritone thing, or because you know, the baritone, a lot of the time it's like it's way, you're not writing so much in that lower, you know, lower range of the the piano there. And also, like, what I can play in terms of melody is very limited on the piano versus on the saxophone, you know. So really learning about what how to compose an effective melody using the right range of your instrument. It's like, oh, hello, well, it makes more sense to use my instrument to write versus the piano, you know, at least for me. And that's kind of what I gained from learning about the registers of certain instruments.
That is so interesting because most of the people that I've spoken to on the podcast, many of them write at the piano. And it's interesting the way you
Yeah,
say,
and there's nothing wrong with that. That's like, I mean, I think it's good to explore both ways and find out what works best for you, you
yeah,
know.
because it's also it's not only the register of the instrument I feel. I've written more classical stuff in the past, but whenever I'm writing a part, I think about that instrument. I think about the tonal quality of it. I think about the register of it and what characteristics does that instrument have that I want to bring
Yeah,
out in this.
right.
And that's cool because that you say, hey, if I'm writing for Bari, let me write it on Bari. I would do the
Yeah.
same thing on trumpet and other types of instruments. Very cool.
Yeah, and just like just knowing the registers of each instrument, I think is very important if you're going to be writing for certain instrumentation. Just know the instrument. Makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know?
All right, now we're going to dive after college and just talk about your early years, being on the scene. What was it like for you? What kinds of gigs were you playing? And we're going to absolutely get into, like your albums and your I'll call it a partnership in a sense with Alexa Tarantino because you guys,
Hmm.
are doing a lot of things together. But what were your early years
Yeah.
like on the scene?
Well, I one of the first gigs I had was subbing in the Diva Jazz Orchestra. That was so much fun. I would get to do a lot of fun tours with them, and um, also I was playing in this funk band with Ada Ravati, tenor player, and we would play at these little divey clubs, in New York, and just have so much fun. And such a great player and writer and arranger, and just such memorable times playing in that band. And in that band, I also made the connection with Amanda Monaco, the guitarist, and she and I do a lot of things together now as well. So I feel like these formative years for me, really out in college and outside, like, get once I graduated, um, there were a lot of things happening that still carry through to today. And then, I worked freelance, just a lot of different big bands, like whatever I get called to do, like ghost bands, like the Artie Shaw Orchestra and the Benny Goodman Orchestra. And, yeah, that was actually my first gig right after 9/11 happened. I went out with the Benny Goodman Orchestra, and
Wow.
we played on this cruise ship that went to all the different Hawaiian islands. So it was kind of an interesting time, being that it was like maybe a month or so after 9/11, but having that experience of going to a place like Hawaii right after that was
Sur-
very
Surreal.
it was very surreal. I mean, I kind of was like, should I just stay here? Like, but well, life would have been very different, you know. Um,
Yeah.
but obviously, I came back to New York. And then in like 2003, I started playing with the Mingus Band, and that really changed um, a lot of things for me as far as, like, I've really been very fortunate in having had playing with them since then, and getting to tour like all over the world, Europe, Asia, many different states, and getting to know that music. That music has been a huge, profound influence on me, um, in terms of really learning how to play the music of Charles Mingus, learning about the spirit of Charles Mingus, developing, the community aspect with the members of that band, and Sue Mingus and everybody that works for that organization. That has been a a true honor for me to be a part of that legacy, you know. Um, and let's see. I mean, I did a lot of, like, I've done a lot of big bands over the years, but I also enjoy the small group thing. And I have like my own quartet, and I have a quintet with Alexa Tarantino, LSAT, and the collective Lioness, which is myself, Amanda Monaco, Alexa, Jenny Hill, Akiko Saruga, and Sylvia Cuenca. So that's a really fun, you know, a
Yeah.
fun collective of girls. Just just great music and great vibes, you
Yeah,
know.
definitely playing some smoke and stuff. Let's get into that for a second. So let's talk about when you first met Alexa Tarantino and because first
Yeah.
of all, I love the name LSAT. That's awesome. Great
My
way of
husband's responsible for that, and it makes up our initials, so it just worked perfectly.
it's perfect. That's great. How did you guys first meet? Because I said this in an email to you, I think, that I feel like you guys have that connection, kind of like Antonio Hart and Roy Hargrove. It's that kind of thing going on there.
We're very Alexa and I think part of, what I've always enjoyed the combination of alto and Bari. I just always thought it sounded so cool. And with Alexa, when I actually met her when she was in high school, when she was a student at the Litchfield Jazz Camp, and I knew her. I didn't really work with her that much at the camp, but I just remember hearing her and thinking like, wow, she has really something very special in her sound, and her playing. And then years later, we wound up playing together with the Diva Jazz Orchestra for the show with Maurice Hines, the Tapping Through Life. And the saxophone section was myself, Alexa, and Roxy Koss. And we did this gig in Wilmington, Delaware for about a month, maybe a little longer. And we were all living at this apartment complex in Wilmington. And we just had such a blast. The gigs were fun. You're playing every night. You're really able to get into like this groove because you're creating this section sound every single night. And Alexa and I, like, when I played with her, it was almost like, oh, I don't even have to, not that I don't have to think, but it just worked so well, the way that our sounds, I feel like, really complement each other. So, when we decided to do the LSAT band, we really wanted to make it, and she's also like one of my best friends. So we really wanted to make it about just like fun, having a good time, like a lot of improvisation, playing the music that we love to play, whether it's some of our originals or the songs of our heroes. We just want it to be a good time.
Yeah.
So eventually we'll do a record, that'll be specifically LSAT stuff.
Post-COVID, yes.
Yeah. I mean, a few people are doing some socially distanced recordings right now, but we'll see. Hopefully things will start, opening back up as far as that's concerned, because I know the studios have got to be hurting too.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But now let's get to Lioness. Okay, so
Hmm.
like I said, that was an awesome show that I saw. Talk about how you mentioned it in that recording, but just in case these listeners don't know, how did that collective start?
So it actually started with myself and Amanda. So Amanda Monaco, she has a nonprofit called Convergence Arts, and through that we were able to put together a concert series where we presented the music of certain band leaders. So the first series wound up being myself, Alexa, and Roxy and Amanda, and so all of our groups played as part of this concert series that we called Lioness at Flushing Town Hall in Queens. That was last year or the year before. It's like trying to remember. But it was within the last 2 years. So then, oh yeah, that was 2018. So then the following year, Mark Free, the producer from Positone, said, well, what about doing a record? And then we decided to do the Lioness Collective. And then Lioness wound up becoming a band based on that record. So on the record, it wound up being myself, Alexa, Jenny Hill on tenor, Akiko, and Amanda. Allison Miller is on the record, but Sylvia has been playing most of the gigs with us. So Sylvia's, been doing the Lioness gig now. And so hopefully we'll be doing another record, within the next several months, another Lioness record. But, this year we were slated to have a few nice gigs, and unfortunately, due to COVID, that all got pushed to next year. But again, it's just, for me, it's like music needs to be fun, and sure, I could do gigs with people I don't like. That's when it becomes a job. But I would prefer to do gigs with people I enjoy being around, right? So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
why not? If you have the choice. And also Linus is it's not about us. It's not just about the individual. It's about the collective, right? And also it's important for us, like one of our a message that we want to convey, especially to to young women who are aspiring to be musicians, is to show them like, hey, here's a all female group that's Like we're all friends. We've all known each other from different, different walks in the business, and we're coming together and creating something fun and powerful and empowering.
Absolutely, and killing it, and killing it. Absolutely. I loved the compositions from that one set, from that Dizzy's Rewind. I thought were
Thank you.
really good. What's the name of the album?
It's called Pride and Joy.
Cool. And is there, we're going to talk about your links in a second, but is that album available on your website?
The Lioness record, if you go to the Positone website, it's available through their website. Um, I have to check my inventory and see what I have. If you did just want me to send you a copy, I would be happy to do that. You could just contact me through my website. But if you just wanted to do the iTunes thing, or, you can certainly do that. The links are on the Positone site. You just may have to just do a search for search for the album.
Okay, cool. And what we'll do, I just took a note right now too. I'm going to find those links. I want to put it in the show notes because
Okay,
I think it'd be
sure.
great to let people know and let them absolutely hear it. I think it would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great, and I love that name, Linus. I think it's powerful. It's positive. It's powerful. I think it's a great message, and I do hope you guys tour. That would be great if you toured the
I hope
country.
so too. Yeah, we had a few dates that will happen next year. Hopefully next year, and if not, the following year. But the it's I think Linus can be, like I said, it's more than just about us. It's about, like, there's a message in that, and like you said, you like the word. I think that when if you were to say the word lioness, people usually have a certain type of image that comes to mind, you know, and that's something that we really want to portray through the music.
Absolutely. And I think you definitely are doing that. And I hope that, out here in California, things are more closed down than most of the country. So I hope that by the
Yeah,
time you guys tour, something will be open so
I
that you can
know.
dig here.
We would love to come that way. I know Sylvia's from the I know she's from the Northern California area. My geography is not the greatest. She's from San Jose, so if I'm not
Okay, yeah.
mistaken, that's a little bit more north.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, it would be great to come down to your neck of the woods down there, and I mean, I love California, so it would be nice to come and play some shows out there. We just have to get through this little moment in time here, and
Absolutely.
hopefully we'll
Absolutely.
get back to touring and doing what we love to do, and that's spread happiness through music.
Yes, and actually, I want to talk about like your albums and like, the concepts behind them, but
Hmm.
I've got to remember too, I want to talk to you about like what are you doing now, during COVID. So let's get to the albums. So you have three
Sure.
albums out.
Yeah, so I have my first record was called Blueprint. It's on the Inner Circle music label. It was Greg Osby's label, and he had actually approached me about doing the record. At first, I didn't feel like I was ready, but again, I just it's one of those things where you're like, listen, if Greg Osby asks you to do a record, you do it.
Yep.
You know, if he thinks you're ready, I think it's time to go. And I was maybe like 27 or at the time, 27, 28. So I was still, well, still we're still figuring things out. You know what I mean? But I had a lot of original music at that point that I felt like would be a, a good representation of where I was at that moment, you know. And had an amazing band, George Colligan and Boris Kozlov and Jonathan Blake, and we just had a blast. And those guys I was playing with a lot. And the Mingus band, they were like the core rhythm section at that time. So we just all had such a great vibe, and had a great studio date. So that was what year was that? That was like 2008 or something. 2000, yeah, 2008,
Okay.
2009, around that time. And then my second album, Bliss, that was released 2018. So I
Oh,
waited
wow.
about 10 years. Yeah, you know, I had like, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I just had a lot of stuff going on in my life that was, not to say like things were preventing me from doing whatever, or, not that that was an excuse, but you just kind of get busy working, and I wasn't really thinking about like my own things so much. I was busy just, yeah, I was lucky to be busy as a side person, you know, and doing a lot of other people's gigs. But um, I feel like with Blueprint, I really had a moment where I was really focused on my thing, and then I kind of got away from it, you know. And then when the time came from Bliss, it was like really the right time to do that record, you know. So, and I had been on a few records like as a side person before that, so it was weird. It was almost like, wow, so 10 years went by. I didn't even realize it had been that long.
Oh, wow.
you know, but that's how fast, like 10 years, just snap your fingers and it's gone.
Yeah.
So, um a lot of stuff wound up on that record that, I had written several years prior. Like again, I still had a lot of music, but I just hadn't gotten into the studio to do the record, you know. And then, the Lioness record, which is, again, more of a collective, but I guess, I'm what you would call like a founding member of the band. So there's that record. And then hopefully, we'll do an LSAT record at some point, another Lioness record. But I do want to, I'm starting to get to the point where I feel like I have enough material for another quartet record. So
Cool.
I'd like to do that. And then there's another project that I'm a part of that the alto saxophonist Purim Jin is doing. It's like I haven't done the recording yet, but it's like the front line is like a super sax lineup. So like like alto, and then alto doubling on soprano, and then tenor and Bari. It's like a 4 saxophone
Oh, cool.
thing. So that'll be fun. So there's a few things down the pipe. I did a duo thing with Helen Sung a couple like last year at Newport. So I'd like to get that going again. You know, um, it's just this pandemic thing.
It is actually, let me ask you something though, because I'm really curious in terms of especially Barry sax, right? So your approach, you're playing a duo, your approach, you're playing in a quartet or a quintet, mindset, like as a Barry player, what are what's going on in your mind in terms of how you approach your part, your soloing, your role, that's a better word to use.
Yeah, every situation, like you want to sound like yourself. And I feel like in general, I probably don't change too much as far as like how I'm soloing in different situations. I mean, maybe a little bit depending on what the music calls for,
Okay.
you know, but I would say, like, for example, the way that I solo and play in the Mingus Band is probably very similar to how I solo and play in my quartet, you know? Like, I feel like you know, again, though, this, like, if I'm playing in the Lioness Collective, um, I'm thinking in terms of more of a section because I want the section to be balanced. So, in terms of what I'm playing, I have to make sure that it's balanced and I'm serving as more of an anchor depending on, you know, like being like sounding over the top. Do you know what I mean?
That's what I was trying to
So
get
I
to. Yeah.
have to be mindful, of that.
And in a duo setting, I mean, it's different. Like what, yeah.
Yeah, so that in that kind of setting, like I said, like I'll still sound like myself, but it might just be a little bit more it's even more so conversational, you know, and especially like playing with somebody like Helen, who is really has such a strong sense of like who she is as a player, you know, and same with me. So it's like I, you know, I want to do right in terms of like how we play off of each other, you know, in that kind of setting.
How do you prepare for something like that? Like, I excuse my ignorance. What instrument does she play?
So Helen's a great piano player,
Okay.
and a lot of it though, again, like is really being having an understanding of where they come from musically, you know, and I have the same connection like with my friend Amanda, Monica, the guitarist, because I've known her for many, many years. And when I play, you know, I'm very familiar with her style, you know.
Okay.
So it's like, to me, sometimes the duo situation, it's like, is complementary, it's conversational, you know, and it can be very like high energy, but it also has the capability of being very, very like quiet and more controlled, you know.
How would you, for someone, I'm thinking of this question. Someone may have a question. How do I want to get into playing duos, but how do I approach practicing? What do I practice? How do I,
Hmm.
do you know what I mean? Like, how do I approach doing that?
I think, you know, the biggest fear with people is like, oh, how do I just play with one other person and I don't have a full rhythm section to support me?
Yeah.
A lot of that comes down to, again, like something I've noticed myself doing a lot more during this pandemic. You're practicing by yourself all the time. So you have to be the soloist, the rhythm section, the bass player, that, you know what I mean? You have to be all of that, right? So you have to create a really strong foundation for that. And I think that when you practice playing duo with somebody, that, you know, yeah, it can expose certain kinds of weakness, but like earlier we were having this conversation about like having weakness but finding strength in that, in having that weakness, because that's what enables you to grow,
Yeah.
right? So again, like don't be afraid to say like, oh, like what would I even do, you know? Yeah, so again, I would just approach it from a really strong foundational point. And so I was just saying how you really have to be not just the soloist, but you have to be the rhythm section. You got to have to be the bass player. You have to think of yourself in all these different roles. Like, how do you approach it if you're just playing solo saxophone? You know, you would play differently than if you're just playing with the rhythm section, you know, because you need to have the people hear like what it is that you're playing, you know? So I might do something a bit more foundational bass where I'm really like outlining the chords very, very clearly and playing with a really extremely strong sense of time versus just like playing over the bar line constantly and taking a lot of liberties rhythmically. I might play it slightly differently. Do you know what I mean?
That's
But
actually great advice.
if you're, you know, if you really are in sync with the person you're playing duo with, sometimes you can really get past a lot of that kind of like arbitrary, you know, timekeeping, and it still makes musical sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really valuable stuff that you just shared right there. Um, you know what I want to, I know I appreciate your time. Oh my gosh, but I have to get a couple more questions out. I'm sorry. Um,
It's okay.
your sound is huge, all right? You're huge, huge,
Oh,
huge sound. So we've got to talk
thank
about your
you.
tone, your tonal concept. And I know people are going to be, even though it is listed on your website, people are going to be very curious about the equipment that you use. And I'll also want you to talk about you use a very unusual strap, a harness, really it's more of a strap there that's very interesting. I know it's made by BG, so I want
Yeah.
you to talk about that too.
So I use the here I'll just grab it real quick. Sorry. A little
Oh, that's
further away than what I thought it was.
good.
So here we go. This is the BG Comfort shoulder strap, and it's awesome because, well, it has this nice cushion,
Yeah.
and I just place it over like this.
Oh, you do put it. I was wondering about that. Okay. It
Yeah,
almost
I
looked like it
rest
was.
it on this side on
Okay.
my right shoulder, and then that way I can just hook into, hook into my horn that way. I have tried it. You can wear it the other way if you prefer. I always advise people to try both because sometimes the left side might work better for you. For me, I felt like it was just pulling too much. If I have it on my right side, it just feels a bit more balanced to me. That's just, again, like you have to try, I think, different and stick with it for like at least a week. You know what I mean? That's why, like, just like try that, try a harness, try a neck strap and see what works the best for you. I mean, some people prefer just a plain old neck strap. You know, for me that doesn't really work.
Yeah, it hurts.
But for somebody, yeah, I mean, everybody has their own personal preferences as far as what's comfortable. And for me, the shoulder strap, it wound up working better for me over time versus the harness. The harness for me became too constrictive.
Okay, all right, I could see that. And what's really interesting though, that's like, and I've always thought of this too. That's just like a guitar strap when you think about it. You know how you
Yeah.
put on a guitar strap. Does it take the weight? I mean, it looks like it takes the weight definitely off of your neck. Um, do you feel like it takes a lot of the weight of the horn off, or it just like kind of puts it in a different spot, so to speak?
Well, maybe a little bit of both because if I was to try it like versus say my harness or neck strap, the weight feels still like it's being pulled forward. With this, it's there's a redistribution happening. Like I almost feel, I don't know, I feel like a little bit more relaxed, when I'm using the shoulder strap because maybe just because there's a bit more space. So I'm getting like a bit more space and a bit more support without the constriction of the harness and without the sense of that I'm being pulled forward, you know, because the harness would rest down here, the shoulders and in front, whereas that the strap, like even though I put it on, the hook is there, the horn is on this side, you dig?
Yeah,
So it's like it's resting on this side. I don't feel like I'm being tugged, you know tugged
right.
forward.
Because of the way you put it. That's
Yeah.
kind of counteracting that.
Yeah, but that's why also I think it's good to try both sides, because maybe somebody feels like, oh, well, my left shoulder is a bit better, or, both sides can work. I've certainly done that myself, but again, I find myself going, I prefer the right side. It just works.
That's cool. I noticed that right away. I'm like, I've got to ask her about that. All right.
Mhm.
But your tone. All right. So tonal concept. All right. Now that I know that you studied with Jeff Lang, I understand, but the audience may not understand. So, how did you develop that tone? Because it's huge.
Well, a lot of long tone exercises for sure. A lot of not just like say practicing loud long tones, but long tones with controlled volume, say soft to loud, loud to soft, different types of attacks on long tones, different long tone exercises. I do a lot of like intervallic exercises, and a lot of exercises that force you to get really comfortable in like the weird nooks of the instrument, like all the lower the lower keys, all the basement keys, like A and B flat and B, and getting really comfortable, like you know being able to support and use a lot of air support down in that lower register, but long tones really not just down there but in the upper register as well, focusing on the palm keys. You can't just practice long tones in one area of the horn. You have to kind of hit all of them. And that's part of why I like practicing long tones in more of an intervallic pattern based way versus just practicing arbitrary long tones, because I think even just practicing long tones in intervals helps you gain strength in other aspects of playing the saxophone versus just, you know, taking a note and holding it out, which is fine. I mean, I still do that sometimes, but I still prefer to do more, I guess, like I have a few long tone pattern type exercises that I enjoy playing.
It builds
That
your
I
ears too.
Yeah, and your chops and facility, you know. So I just think it's all good, you know, as far as like finding interesting ways to practice your long tones so you can really develop a strong sound and you know, figuring out setup what works for you, you know. Um and experimenting with mouthpieces, reeds, ligatures, even like the hook, like I use a metal hook on my horn, that makes a big difference.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like for me, the plastic hook, I felt like made the sound a little bit deader, you know.
Oh,
I
how
know it
interesting.
sounds strange, but I
No, it's
really
not.
feel, I really felt a difference.
No, it's you know
Yeah.
this brings up a very interesting topic just for a second, but there's lots of accessories, lots of devices out there, like the LaFreak, like the buzz screws, the sound screws, all that kind of thing. And there's people that are like, oh, that's a bunch of crap and all that kind of thing. But what people don't realize is that, you know, while you may not hear a difference in the sound, or maybe you will, but it's the feeling, you know, it
Yeah.
right? It makes sometimes it makes it feel more efficient.
Yeah, this I I don't know how to quite put my finger on it, but I just for me it was like that feeling of the metal on metal was better than having the plastic, and also I just felt like it was more substantial. The plastic ones tended to break on me, you know. So, you know, and again, like adjusting your reeds, figuring out what sound it is that you're trying to go for, you know?
And
Like,
so that's tonal concept. So like you mentioned
yeah,
Pepper Adams.
yeah, like having a strong idea of like what sound you're attracted to, what like different musicians whose sound you like to hear. These are all important things, you know, because usually when somebody want their what they say, oh, I really want to work on my sound or I want to work on tone, a lot of the time they don't even have an idea of who they even want to sound like. And that's like I usually say, well, that's the first issue is that you don't know who you want to sound like. So that's the first problem we need to address. You have to listen to a lot of people to figure out what sound is attractive to you, you know.
Absolutely. That's
Mhm.
awesome advice. And now, since we hinted at it, what equipment do you use?
Okay, so I have my buffet crampon saxophone. Um, it's the Lacquer 400 series. I have RPC mouthpiece. The tip opening I think is a 115. Has a medium rollover baffle. I use an Oleg ligature. It's I think it's the 24 karat gold one.
Oh,
So
wow,
you got to
okay.
be careful with it. And I use Rico orange box. Rico by Daddario is what they're called now. Rico by Daddario orange box reads um, and number threes.
Interesting. Now,
Yeah.
did Jeff get you hooked onto the RPC mouthpiece, or was that just
No, this was actually Joe Temperley did. He was one of my instructors. So he was the one that introduced me to the RPC.
interesting? Interesting. Okay, cool. All right. So, I also wanted to ask one more question about breath support. You had played alto for a number of years, and then you moved on over to the Bari and stuff. What was that transition like in terms of breath support? Like, you know, how how do you approach breath support aside from long tones? You know, are there any other tips that you can give people?
Um, well, a lot of it I think is being able to regulate your breath. And so long tones is certainly a part of that, but there are breathing exercises that you can practice away from your instrument, such as like really trying to steady your breath, trying to count your breath, you know. Some people, I mean, I'm a big practitioner of yoga, so
Okay.
I got really into the pranayama exercises, and that really like that really changed a lot of things for me, you know, as far as being breath control. And a lot of it is just about having good support, you know, thinking from supporting from your core versus like just supporting from here. If your sound is all here, then you're not going to have any support. So sometimes it's like just changing your posture, you know,
Yeah.
like I have to tell myself not to like slouch and try to think like leaning back a little bit more, you know, and then you open up everything here. And if you concentrate on a spot that's like above you when you're practicing versus like looking down, as we oftentimes can do,
Oh,
that
yeah.
will really change your sound. Because if you go like this, I mean, I'll have a student be like, okay, well, play like the way you're playing. Okay, now lean back 2 inches. Huge difference every time,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
That's great advice. That's awesome advice. Now, I have to ask this one question that people are always curious about also. Has there been any one particular purchase, like under $100 within the last couple of years, that really is influential for you or your students or whatever, that you can't live without?
um, well, I mean, this is sort of outside of music, but I was just talking about yoga, and I was thinking about that question because that was something you had mentioned in the email. Um, I was gonna say my yoga mat because I was trying to think of anything like what do I have that's under $100 that I can't live without besides food, coffee, um, yeah. I mean, you know, I kind of you know, I'm like a girly girl. I like to buy, you know, makeup and things like that. um, yeah, I like under $100. I mean, I think it'd have to be my yoga mat,
Cool. No,
you
that's good.
know.
That's definitely good. Because we were talking about actually microphone equipment and all that kind of stuff, and the pandemic buying, the pandemic purchases, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, the equipment that we have is certainly not under $100, unfortunately. But yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome for sharing that. And before we go, we have to know your links. So like your website,
Sure.
social media, all that kind of thing.
Okay, so my website is laurensevian.com. And I always tell an easy way to remember the spelling of my last name is think Avion water and put an S in front of it. And
That's cool.
Instagram is, you know, at Lauren Sevian. Twitter is at Baritone Lauren. And then I have a Facebook page, which is if you just search for there's a few. There's the Lioness page, Lauren Sevian, and then also the LSAT page. So there's a few different pages on Facebook, but Instagram, I would say, and my website are probably my preferred forums of the social medias.
Cool. And right now during the pandemic, are you doing anything regularly online that people can tune into?
Let me think if I don't have a like I'm doing kind of like things here and there, like a master class here and there. Nothing regular weekly shows yet, but I'm thinking of a few things. So definitely, like, you know, check my website or social media. But you know, things will come up. I have a couple like online performances that are coming up. We're doing the Flushing Town Hall series again, but we're doing it on virtually.
Oh,
So we'll be
awesome.
presenting some concerts. So Amanda's group will be first, and then my quartet, and then Lioness, and will be the last one. So it'll happen in October, November, and December. So definitely stay tuned for those performances. And
I guess if
yeah,
people like your Facebook pages and stuff, they'll get notifications if they sign up for notifications. They'll get
yeah. And I keep my you know, I keep my socials pretty regularly updated. So um, you know, if something's happening, you should find out.
cool, good. And do you on
Yeah.
your website, do you have a sign up or an email newsletter or something like that?
You can contact me through my website. Um, I don't have a newsletter quite yet, but that's something that's in the works.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, Lauren, thank you so much. You've been really generous with your time.
Oh, it's my
Again,
pleasure.
such a great conversation, and you shared some really, really great stuff here. And just, that one main point of, you know, from weakness can come strength. I think that's really
Yeah. Yeah, we have to keep that in mind, you know.
absolutely. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, Donna. Thank you.